To be continued?
Welcome to the Liberty UA channel. Today our guest is Denis Eliseevich, an entrepreneur and active politician. Welcome, Denis.
Hello, Tatiana.
I encourage viewers to subscribe to our Liberty UA channel. If you don't have time to watch long videos, please subscribe to our Liberty TV channel. Subscribe to Denis Eliseevich's channel as well. We will talk about topics that concern Ukrainians today and that concerned them yesterday. Yesterday there was a visit to London and everyone was talking about the tablet. Right now, everyone is talking about the situation in Brussels, because once again, we realize that 90 billion euros are being blocked. This is being blocked. Orban and Fico are blocking it. They have their own conditions, and it feels like Ukraine has become a bargaining chip among Europeans who are sorting out their relationships with each other.
Why do united Europeans and democratic Europeans allow themselves to treat Ukraine this way?
No, but of course, regarding Ukraine, there's Orban, who serves as a counterbalance to Ursula and Kaja Kallas. Ukraine always plays the role of a bargaining chip. To my great regret, we could have been and still can be a powerful country that is a true subject, but for now, we are a proxy in everything. So there's no need to involve Europe here, and in general, all citizens need to turn off this propaganda bubble that has brainwashed them. They're scared to speak up because they'll bring up the Russian statement about the loan. Right now, we need to think in terms of which actions bring peace closer and which actions push it further away. I can tell you this, I stand exclusively for Ukraine for its well-being. But when money is given to the Zelensky regime, it just goes into the furnace of social payments, just social payments, for war and strengthening his power, and which will be used for weapons production, which he will then travel around the world, offering, selling, and in this way will be useful to other countries, and accordingly will strengthen his own power. I cannot support this. Social benefits and everything else should be paid from Ukraine's budget and from money generated within Ukraine. That is what it means to be a normal country. The government apparatus should be reduced by 70 to 80%, and now, especially in the era of artificial intelligence, maybe even by as much as 90%. And also, everyone who remains should receive their salaries from Ukraine's budget. These loans, those crazy eyes, these insane trips around the world trying to sell the war, just look at what he's bragging about. I have a tablet. He wanted to give it to Trump, but Trump didn't show up. I don't remember where it was.
He didn't come to Munich.
So I'm giving it here in Britain. Look, I have all the statistics here. First, it's to show what a Fedorov and IT we have and the system we're creating. Although I assure you, in today's world, that's not a big deal. I don't want to dwell on this too much. Second, what's the practical benefit of this? You know, someone who often visits Washington sent me a Telegram channel. It's clearly a new channel. It's called Protocol 380. And it actually says there that Zelensky, there they called it a voyage, made this voyage with the goal, as it was said, basically to secure support in order to withdraw from negotiations and distance himself from Trump. And I received the following information, which basically, first of all, is about mobilization. This morning I woke up and saw that it was confirmed. There was also something about tightening mobilization. It's a complete nightmare in Kyiv, but we'll get to that separately in a moment. And as I understand it, he wants to use intelligence from Britain and France. I understand that Trump will cut him off from intelligence and somehow to drag out this war almost entirely with drones. Basically, right now, Zelensky needs air defense and drones and people. The main thing is people who can be thrown into the furnace of war. And basically, he doesn't really need anything else from America. America doesn't give much anyway. And NATO doesn't sell us a lot of offensive weapons. You see now, just a second on the topic of mobilization. So, in the city of Kyiv, terrible things are happening as of today. Things that have already happened and been tested in other cities of Ukraine. In Kharkiv, Odessa, and Dnipro, this has already happened. In Kyiv's residential areas, real raids occur, turning it into a business by changing your data in databases. This is just a huge area. It's a whole industry. Syrskyi spoke out saying they need to draft, what, 400,000 this year? That's more than 35,000 a month, and now to draft them. And now count how many people will buy their way out and multiply that by an average of $10,000 daily. And you'll see what kind of money that is. And if you look back, you started the broadcast, your question was about the 90 billion loan. If you look at it, it's all a huge business, money, money, money. There is no interest of Ukraine here, no future for Ukraine. This war today is purely business and politics, nothing more, nothing else.
What's interesting is that Zelensky himself doesn't say that he's counting on the war lasting. He only says that he relies on his intuition.
He also discusses the events in the East, noting that we are not currently moving toward peace.
I saw the statement you're talking about, and I remember that a deputy spoke, but he didn't give his name. It was an anonymous deputy.
What? Zelensky said that we need to prepare for war and think about what to do while still in the Rada, and supposedly that's where these rumors started. Because after that, Arakanya said soon we will decide whether it's a week or two, and then it will be clear if we are entering a prolonged phase of the war. So you are suggesting that Zelensky went to the king yesterday to, so to speak, pledge allegiance and continue the war?
Yes, to secure support. By the way, it was an anonymous Telegram channel that wrote that Zelensky is being overseen by MI6, the British intelligence service. Well, I don't know. Look, Keir Starmer, the King of Britain, then he goes to Sanchez, and there also to the King of Spain. Again, I think, then he goes. Look, these are the ones who cooperate with the globalists. This is the chain, 1 billion here, 2 billion there, a promise here, securing support there. And really, that's how it all looks. Probably their relationship with Macron has really soured. I don't see those hugs and kisses with Macron anymore. Not as warm as before, basically, to secure Europe's support. You mentioned an anonymous source and a deputy. That's more than one source. I was told about it on the first day, and the information appeared in the press even earlier. Right away, people from the president's office ran out and said, this is fake, we deny it, but it's not fake. He gathered his people and said, guys, get ready to fight. And fundamentally, let's not think about how people will live, not about what will happen to Ukraine, but about how the Verkhovna Rada can continue to function. In this situation, nothing happens to prevent dissolution, but deputies are already openly suggesting dissolving the Verkhovna Rada and holding new elections. They no longer want to be deputies. You see, I can support them situationally and tell them, fully support Donald Trump's initiative. I can tell you even more. In Ukraine, the mechanisms for impeaching the president are terribly written. The constitution needs to be changed. This needs to be rewritten. Impeachment should be a clear procedure that can be carried out step by step. So, like in the US, for example, just take it and adapt it for ourselves. But in Ukraine, it's extremely difficult to do this, but there is a loophole. So if the president of Ukraine is clearly incapacitated due to health reasons, whether it's voluntary or there's suspicion of a crime, but only if it's proven. And this Mindich-Gate and Operation Midas could very well be a precedent if Zelensky is really involved and there is irrefutable evidence. Well, for example, in the Verkhovna Rada, an audio or video is played, probably audio, with Zelensky, some documents are attached, and the whole chain is proven. A huge number of votes is needed there, over 300 people, and the Constitutional Court must participate in more than one vote. Let's start this impeachment process then. It's very complicated, and at least will show America that there is some resistance to the president here. You see, Tatiana, right now, if someone listens to me, if propaganda listens to me, they'll say, look, it's a pro-Russian statement. No, this is a super pro-Ukrainian statement. This is a super pro-Ukrainian statement. I don't care what's in Putin's head. I don't care what's in anyone else's head. I know for sure the Zelensky regime has brought Ukraine to the brink. We could never have imagined this would happen to our country. I even coined a term. In Iran, there's the IRGC, and I came up with KSOP, the Corps of Guards of the Office of the President. I can't stand looking at what's happening around me. This is my first time talking to you and my first broadcast this week. I'll share more details tomorrow. So, these guards of the office of the president are on YouTube, on Telegram channels, everywhere in interviews, defending him, saying how great you are, how wonderful our Zelensky is. He can deal with anyone, and you know what they brag about? He can handle any internal enemies, stand up to Trump, and get along with anyone. Maybe he can, I'm not denying it, maybe he can, but what does Ukraine get out of it? He's a cool guy, really tough, but what does Ukraine get out of it? Can I ask, what do all these people get out of it? So, what's the difference? The privileged ones who say all this, for them it's about money, their lives, their safety. For everyone else, it's horror, blood, and death. At best, in the case of immigration, that's the best case scenario. So let people listen and draw their own conclusions.
You mentioned the Verkhovna Rada and how these recordings would sound in the Verkhovna Rada.
But we know there was a story with the envelopes, and members of the Verkhovna Rada are also afraid that stories about them might come to light.
So it's likely that they are not interested in recognizing and spreading this information.
We saw that the SBU provided the opportunity to extract amber in the Rivne region. So they are also involved in corruption schemes. That's 622.
They took 20 million euros, if I'm not mistaken.
I won't say how much because this information came out a few days ago. Then there was information about Krivonos. He's involved in another corruption scheme. Anti-corruption agencies are discredited, the Verkhovna Rada is corrupt, and Mindich Gate occurred in the government. These problems, well, who is going to present charges to whom, what evidence, and what should be done with them in this case?
That's one argument, but I'll explain the situation in more detail now. I can't recall if it was on air with you or on Canadian radio. I said back in January that I had information there would be an attack on Nabu 2.0 in the spring. That is just like in the summer, do you remember? They tried to basically shut down Nabu and transfer its powers to the Prosecutor General's office. I can see clearly that this is happening now. Let's go step by step so people can understand. So, regarding Krivonos, the director of Nabu, it's not about corruption there. Is it something about a child?
That's a different story with the child. He used the child, said he would buy something for them, and that the mother needed to be there to approve the documents. He broke his promises, refused responsibility as a father, and only needed to formalize his paternity.
But it's a different scheme because he was demanding money for the land plot. And there was another corruption scheme going on at the same time as this one.
That he's involved in corruption. It was shown to everyone that he's involved in corruption. He won't act against the state, the Verkhovna Rada, or the president. Subtitle editor.
And I won't deny or confirm this, but it's very important. Why? Look, even in our anti-corruption agencies, the person in charge is someone who, in principle, if there was a desire, this isn't coming from nowhere either. They probably dug something up there. Something was likely there. Why is Ukraine such a country where practically if you're already in those offices, it's impossible not to get your hands dirty? And if our people can't appoint someone to such positions who can't be compromised at all, then things are really bad for us. But let's do it this way. Assume, for example, that everything said about Krivonos is true. Does all this somehow mean that Operation Midas is nonsense, that Mindich Gate doesn't exist, that we shouldn't push further? You see, it's like when we discuss Bonabank with you. Even if this lady was the biggest vatnik, does that mean her rights can be violated after that? It's the same here. Yes, let the Krivonos, everything about him is true. But does that mean Nabu shouldn't act, provide a counterbalance to Zelensky's power, or investigate corruption? That's the perspective people should consider. Of course, look, it's just not my path. I would even head Nabu because then they wouldn't come up with anything. But it's just not my path. That's just not for me. I'm more focused on being constructive. They need a person of a different kind of mindset there. Now, you mentioned the deputies regarding the compromat.
Of course.
They are compromised, but I want to tell you how the FBI works in principle and actually how all the agencies in America work. That is, there is some kind of structure, there is a pyramid with a boss at the top of this structure, and basically there are no innocent people there. You can be forgiven by making a deal, they forgive you, and you give up the biggest fish. Moreover, they can forgive very big sins and very large-scale corruption, theft, and basically anything practically even, well, I don't know, even murder probably. And if we're talking about members of parliament, then it's about corruption, of course, about corruption, about things like that. Yes, those kinds of cases. But if they all unite, if it's all for a goal like impeaching Zelensky, everything will be forgiven. Everything will be forgiven for them. And if all of this is done properly, if they behave correctly, at least they can try to do it. But they won't have the courage. Few real daredevils exist, which is why there are no leaders. In Ukraine, daredevils are rare, and they try to create one from each. At best, they'll say he's like Zhirinovsky. At worst, they'll say he's the town madman, a Kremlin agent, or a useful idiot. We have a Soviet-style system that discourages individuality. Everyone is expected to obey. Have you seen North Korea's parliamentary election results? They show the results, everyone claps, Kim Jong-un walks around with a cigarette, everyone praises him. That's Zelensky's dream. So our people are used to it too. If someone stands out, that's it. They're the culprits. And now we're discussing them with you. Wait, did you say something else about the SBU?
I mentioned amber, yes, because people are very interested in amber. Not just amber, but minerals in general. We're interested in natural resources, deposits. How can we do without them? Did we give them away to Trump? It turns out the SBU allowed people to extract amber and sell it abroad however they wanted, as long as they paid the money for it, this mineral. And the SBU is involved in this.
Well, look, it's not really a secret for anyone. This business has existed since the very first days of Ukraine's independence. It's a huge illegal business, a colossal business that operates in collusion, just like all similar businesses. Criminals, cops, or special services, let's just call them all law enforcement, and that's the only way it works. And the fact that they caught some SBU officers there, they were probably doing something on the side, didn't share, bypassed someone, maybe some boss, maybe they went too far. But now there will just be other SBU officers in their place. Don't even doubt it, you understand? And it's not about Trump. If we gave amber to Trump, so to speak, but we can mine amber ourselves. What we gave away is something where we don't have the technology or investment.
We didn't give it away?
But we took on US partners. It's important to explain this to people correctly. Then amber wouldn't be stolen, you see. If America was mining amber in Ukraine, then amber wouldn't be stolen. I'm giving you a hint about what was signed with Trump. Well, with the US, actually. Believe me, Trump won't be president anymore. When will the real development start there? So people should understand this as well. And if you want something state-owned, here you go. Here's amber, an example of something state-owned. Ukraine, I don't know, God or nature has blessed it with this resource. Yes, a valuable mineral. Well, this is what we see now.
They couldn't handle it, but you say that in order to impeach the president, the deputies need to be united, and the deputies can't even unite to overturn the actions of the TCC.
As for Mazurashu, he talks about it. I don't know if he's sincere or not. Kamilchuk speaks about it every time, sometimes saying it's good, sometimes worse, sometimes a victory, sometimes a betrayal. Well, at least they're talking about it. They can't unite around this, which isn't even such a complicated issue, so how can they unite around impeachment? Continuation?
Look, most deputies, I don't want to accuse everyone indiscriminately. Most deputies have their own sponsors and bosses who basically tell them do this, push back here, and so on and so forth. That's why these bosses, or the deputies without any bosses, can, for example, get in touch with me. If they don't know, I'll tell them what needs to be done. But what's the situation now? They're still afraid of being charged with a coup. But how is impeachment a coup? It's a legal democratic way to remove the president. Moreover, I'm absolutely against the military junta. I'm absolutely against a revolution right now. I'm absolutely against anything like that. I want a democratic process. If you oppose impeachment, let's have elections, but there aren't any. So, wait a minute. In America, impeachment is a normal, regular thing. In other countries, there's impeachment too. What, do we have a czar or some kind of ayatollah? What's going on? So, you see, for some people, this might seem romantic, but you need to open a history book and read. There are times in a country's history when you have to take historic actions. And maybe for a while we should shove our stack of dollars, which we all love, you know where, and think about something else, at least for a while, and then we can all come back to it. Right now is a historic moment for the country, and I want to tell people something important. Look, you just gave me an idea. There was an Islamic revolution in Iran in the 1970s. Back then there was the Shah's regime, and he was completely pro-Western, he was friends with America, with Israel, everything was fine. But he had a security service, I don't remember what it's called. It repressed people and suppressed any opposition. So basically it was kind of better than under the Ayatollahs, but it was nowhere near a democracy. And then the Ayatollahs came, they overthrew the Shah, the Ayatollahs came, and it was a complete disaster. And look, it's a beautiful country. Iran, wonderful people. Since 1979, they've suffered for 40 years, 45 years now, and even before that. Well, it's much better, but still not perfect. Why am I telling you this? If we allow something similar to happen in Ukraine, let's say we've already allowed it and let it grow, then Ukraine could be in horror for 45 years. The Ayatollahs are still ruling Iran to this day. So what I'm getting at is, no matter how wonderful the country is, no matter how wonderful the people are, If we lose, if we don't take advantage of some of the opportunities we actually have, we could simply lose Ukraine.
What surprises me is that people don't protest against the Ayatollah regime. They're killed, others replace them, and it's clear that this process will continue. One Ayatollah replaces another because there is no support from the people. But why do people suffer if they do suffer? And you see that now there is an opportunity to change the government, but they don't take it. On the contrary, they've united around the Ayatollahs. They say that the Americans want to harm them, so they need to stay united together.
No, that's what the Ayatollahs say, not the people. They're the ones calling for unity. People aren't going out for two reasons. First, 40,000 people have already been killed in previous protests. Second, there are rockets flying now, and in moments like this, people don't protest. We need to wait a little. If there really is an attack on Karg Island, if there's even a partial ground operation, according to my information, they will take control of this strait, meaning preparations are being made for this. Well, according to my information, this should basically already be in the press. What I mean is that this was discussed before, and now it seems preparations are underway. Previously, it was only discussed behind closed doors. If all this is implemented, then maybe the time will come when people will need to go out. But in Ukraine, people don't go out for certain reasons. I want to emphasize, I'm not calling for it. We have martial law, and people here are also afraid. So, in theory, women could be a driving force, but men can't due to the territorial recruitment centers. And now, look, the city of Kyiv has always been at the helm of everything, and everything starts from Kyiv. But now there's intensified mobilization here, which means Zelensky's regime will suppress, and suppress. But I have not called for, I'm not calling for, and will not call for any other ways, only purely democratic ones, of protesting, influencing, and expressing dissatisfaction. And people need to think about this.
People, for this, please at least share our video, subscribe to our channel, give us likes, and subscribe to the Liberty TV channel. If you want to watch short video clips, we would like to hear your opinion about the Strait of Hormuz. In order to capture it, you need to, well, Trump asked NATO countries to join this. I'm interested in your opinion. You always said that only a fool, well, you once said that only a fool would get involved in a war, and a wise person would avoid it at all costs. So what do you think? Did the Europeans really act like wise people? Did they think, why do we need these terrorist attacks? Why should we get involved in this? It's better to avoid this trouble.
Well, look, the point is, you shouldn't get involved, basically, you shouldn't get involved in anything at all, but there is this point. Unfortunately, Lukashenko turned this into a meme, like preventive strikes. I'm not a pacifist, I'm not a pacifist. There have been times in history when not making a preventive strike still led to war. And with Iran, it's that kind of situation, meaning a preventive strike is needed, and Israel has often acted this way. Because, well, you can sit and wait until you're definitely attacked for sure, or you can make a preventive strike. And besides, we're talking about an opponent, Iran, that can definitely be handled, while in Ukraine, Russia was too much to handle. Zelensky got involved, even provoked it to some extent, and we see the result. With Iran, it's a different case. If all the partners united and destroyed the Ayatollah regime, and Iran was already, how should I put it, in the same chain as the Western world, then many things in the world would change, and Russia's position would weaken, and China's position would weaken a lot as well. You know, China imports almost 90% of its oil from Iran. That's why everything is very complicated, but people shouldn't always mix everything together. Look, Trump as a path, it's all different, and everything is different. You need to look deeper.
We see that Iran is still resisting, and if they block the Strait of Hormuz, well, Iran won't just stand aside either. They will use the weapons they have. If they capture this Karg Island, from which they load tankers, where they load oil because the depth is suitable, and tankers can approach there to transport it through this strait. So if America claims this island, well, surely the Iranians will fight too. Then no one will get this oil, neither the Americans nor the Iranians.
No, the Ayatollahs will fight up to a certain point, definitely. You see, one ruler was eliminated, another was eliminated, but they still remain a highly organized structure. Maybe in some ways this was underestimated, I don't deny it, it's a very powerful structure. But now the situation is such that you can't just walk away, you need to bring it to some logical conclusion. And since this is the case, you have to act. the positions of power still have some options left. You see, what the Ayatollahs are doing around the world is financing terrorism, and that argument is enough. Thank you.
As for Ukraine, there is little trust in the deputies. You address the deputies, but you say that those who are active are the ones who control them. So probably you addressed the Ukrainian oligarchs and said, look at the situation, do something about it. And we saw that the Deputy Assistant Inspector General of the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, spoke in Congress. And he said that 26 billion in direct budget support was given to Ukraine. The money went to Ukraine, but there was no transparency in how it was spent. Sometimes there was an audit, sometimes there wasn't, sometimes it was remote, sometimes it wasn't transparent, sometimes it wasn't timely. How can you comment on this?
Look, first the oligarchs, then USAID. Let's separate these here. So the oligarchs, I understand why they didn't get active, because that's their attitude. They don't have what I have. They don't understand that you need to take a pause for something bigger. There are moments like that. I wouldn't want to deal with all this either. Let me put it simply. There was a moment when Zelensky's power could have been finished off. Not Zelensky himself, but Zelensky's power could have been finished off. When they were removing Yermak, people started to act more boldly. You remember that period, about a month? Everyone started speaking out more bravely. They started to pressure Zelensky. If one or two oligarchs had gotten involved, that's it. We would have at least achieved elections. But they decided, as long as I'm making money, I'll keep making money. I'm not planning to live in Ukraine anyway. I have a house in London, in Vienna, in Paris, and somewhere else in Spain. You know, Poroshenko's people really love Spain. So what does Ukraine mean to me? It's just a cash cow for me, so I'll keep milking this cash cow any way I can. And how do they justify themselves? They say, these people will thank me later, but no, they won't. I felt it myself. And maybe they're watching, but honestly, they even make him out to be the guilty one. They say, why do I need this? People want it. People really want it. Look, Tatiana, you're probably planning to ask a question. We'll get to you, Sadie, in a moment. I've made a note. You're probably planning to ask a question on Telegram about this, Denis. But still, with Iran, the situation is that negotiations on Ukraine have stopped. Everything has shifted there, and now that's it. And I just have a simple question. Does Ukraine, represented by Zelensky, really need negotiations? Well, we didn't have a situation with Iran where there were active negotiations where you either make a compromise or you make a compromise. Secondly, I really don't like the fact that actually the US and Zelensky himself foolishly came out and said this in his evening video address. The US is ready to provide us with written security guarantees and ratify it in Congress. Zelensky himself talked about this. We are getting such a privilege as security guarantees from the most powerful country in the world, but we are not ready to make concessions. How is that possible? Are we being too bold? That's another question I have. America is supposed to provide all the security guarantees already, and Zelensky is supposed to make a territorial compromise. There are people living there, 200,000, not just 200. I've talked to everyone, both with the military and publicly and privately, and I've reached out to other sources. And in the US, they believe there aren't even close to 200,000 people there. At best, it's a little over 100,000, just over 100,000. You saw the video of the girl from TikTok recording from Kramatorsk without electricity, without internet. Some devices to catch Wi-Fi, to read the news, that's life. I just have a question. Let's say Putin doesn't succeed. He's slowly biting off Donbas for years, and now these people are living, no, not living, but merely existing and surviving. And this applies to all issues with Russia. We need to sit down and solve them now, not leave any festering wounds. Everything needs to be resolved. You understand? So, I'm wrapping up the blog section. Our priority is definitely peaceful negotiations, but I'm not sure about that. We also need to switch everything to war with Iran. USAID, 26 billion. I read it. It was an official report for Congress to be continued.
But what about how Sturback spoke in Congress?
The audit from March, that's fresh, the freshest information. I'm reading it and my eyes are popping out. No, the scheme is primitive. Double, triple payments. You understand? So the affected person, while they're scheming there, got paid. And let's say, for each of these cases, I'm just modeling the situation here, imagining that 5 or even 10 people got paid on the sly thanks to what they pulled off. And then that money was returned to the organizers of the scheme. But what surprised me was something else. I read that Deloitte didn't submit audit reports on time, nor did KPMG, and these are supposed to be global leaders in the field of auditing. So, you see, this is a massive scheme worth billions of dollars. It's such a big piece of the pie that many people have been dividing up and devouring, and they want to keep devouring it. But you remember how I spoke out against USAID, and we already talked about it back then and did broadcasts and discussed all of this. And how did they attack me? They basically called me an idiot. This is about healthcare. Ukrainians were helping healthcare.
Culture.
They were helping culture. This is all nonsense. A shameful culture should support itself. It either exists or it doesn't. So, yes, they helped one person with medical needs, but 10 others stole from it. Can't the state just handle this on its own without USAID deciding who needs help? And no, as it turns out, no. Oh well, that's a long topic.
Will the Americans look for this money, or will they just decide to stop funding Ukraine further?
Trump said that not a single penny more will be given, we won't get any more money, and these people will just forgive the debt. Will the Ukrainian people have to pay it back, or what?
But pay attention. Trump said, St. Patrick's Day was recently celebrated in the US, and this guy came from Ireland to see him, and they were there, and Trump said, Biden allocated $350 to $400 billion to Ukraine, and it's finally time to find out where that money is. And the next day, something about USAID appears in the press. Everyone here knows. Everything is here. Signals are being sent. It's just that Zelensky is not the kind of person who will respond to such signals. 1, 2, 3. And then they took those vans with money, with gold, took them away, and made the information public. You know the information now. I remembered Orban, what information is coming in now, and that channel I told you about is writing about it, and I was told about it before. So, regarding Orban, well, first of all, Orban will be actively supported by Trump. J.D. Vance will go there before the elections to speak and show support, and that's very serious. Just imagine if the president or vice president of the U.S. came to support some candidate for president of Ukraine. Can you imagine what kind of support that would be? It's incredible, but according to these, let's officially call them rumors, according to these rumors, if Viktor Orban loses, or rather if he wins, a scenario like the one used in Romania, and Moldova will be applied. And if that doesn't work either, then a color-type revolution could break out in Hungary. And these are just rumors, but I personally really believe in this. As for other people, let them decide for themselves.
I wonder if Ukraine held elections, would anyone show up, or would any Americans support a Ukrainian candidate?
Maybe they would only support one. They wouldn't support anyone else. 3 is our oligarchs putting their eggs in different baskets. America doesn't do that.
You said that you knew I wanted to ask you questions. I really wanted to ask. It seems I wanted to ask you, what is the war strategy? Because the Russians you saw are already reaching Zaporizhzhia on horseback. Because of the fog, the mud, they're using horses, and the public channels are saying it's 14 kilometers to Zaporizhzhia Tulsi.
Gebhardt is speaking and says that Russia has maintained an advantage in the war against Ukraine until an agreement is reached. Moscow will likely continue to wage a slow war of attrition until it believes its goals have been achieved.
What is our strategy? What is the strategy of this war as of today?
None. Just to secure power for Volodymyr Zelensky, that's all. Well, it's just about securing power for Zelensky. What is the strategy of the war? Have you seen the photo? Yesterday, Yermak and Sean Penn went to the front, some 157th or whatever, I won't make things up, brigade. They were received there. The military was with them. I have a first question. Who is Yermak? What is his status? That he is even allowed at the front? What if he is a Russian agent who... And everything else? Is that possible? It could be. And that's the whole strategy for you, PR, Sean Penn. Look, come on, Sean Penn, what did he do? Excuse me, he partied, probably got some money. Although he's having problems now, nevertheless, against the backdrop of our magnificent city. But the war continued there, and those guys remained under fire, and our country is under fire. Also notice how these anonymous Telegram channels link to the president's office and the media. All these controlled, nasty, even stinky ones make it seem like our counteroffensive is almost successful. But when you check deep state, things are actually getting worse. Regarding Tulsi Gabbard, unfortunately, I saw it. A translation appeared on your channel. I advise people to watch her speech. She spoke for the whole 20 minutes. And at the beginning, she says, "These are not my assessments. These are not my words. I am speaking as the director of an intelligence agency," meaning this is the intelligence community, bringing together a bunch of sources, analysts, including artificial intelligence, which they are actively using now. They processed all this information. And Tulsi Gabbard, simply as an official who is supposed to do so, came out and voiced it, and she said directly, Russia is winning. If it is said that Russia has the advantage, it means Russia is winning. Could it have been otherwise, considering the resources? No, it couldn't. And now look, now pay attention, Tatiana, you and the viewers. And if negotiations take place, let's say in a week or two, what do you think? Will Russia's position at the negotiating table now be stronger or weaker than it was 3 weeks ago? Stronger? Why? Because there is a war going on in Iran. Yes, in the short term, oil prices have risen, which means Russia has strengthened its finances. So, stronger or weaker? And why am I saying this? Not to say that, I approve of this war, whether it's right or wrong, I probably support this war. The overthrow of the Ayatollah regime, that's how I would put it. But in fact, Putin got more money, became stronger, and not to shift the topic to this war. Because who's to blame that we dragged it out until this moment? We could have ended the war in January, we could have, or in February we could have, could we? Why isn't it like that? What does the war have to do with it? If we've dragged it out to the 5th year, Tatiana, the war is in its 5th year. Just think about it. The Great Patriotic War lasted less. This war is in its 5th year. We could have ended it sooner, but we dragged it out. So, when these negotiations take place, if they do take place, if Zelensky still doesn't plan to walk out of them, but honestly, even if he does walk out, I think it will be after the next round. Still, for the sake of decency, this round will have to be held, since it was already agreed upon in advance. People, consider this. Where is the guarantee that nothing will happen in the world, whether in a year, 2 or 3, since Zelensky plans to fight for 3 more years? What if China targets Taiwan? Actually, right now in America, intelligence agencies believe that they want to take over Taiwan not by military means. Just like the US in Cuba, there won't be a military operation there. It will be economic, so to speak. The US or others will take over Cuba economically. Wars will flare up. Other wars could break out. Yes, that Tulsi Gabbard says the main nuclear threat to the US today is Pakistan. And everyone is like, oh, really? Where's the guarantee that things won't change even more in a year, 2 or 3? And remember the impact of artificial intelligence. That's why prolonging the war means fewer of our people, less of our territory, lost lives, lost health, lost everything.
Our subscribers understand this. They write comments under every video saying that they understand and want peace.
The problem is that no one asks us. The authorities do as they please, and the authorities don't change. And they say that an honest mobilization means that those who haven't risked their lives, especially bloggers and activists, Mosichuk was recently included there, are avoiding their duty. In other words, they're not going to the front. These tigers, they say, will run for parliament as patriots. They shouldn't be allowed in because they didn't defend the country, but these people who mobilized others against their will, they can be allowed in. Is that right?
Yermak can be allowed in, Mindic can come back, give him his citizenship back if it was even taken away at all. Or that corrupt energy minister, what's his name, Halushchenko or whatever, let's say, or a corrupt volunteer, for example. There was a scandal about that too. I can see it from the audience. Even those against me made some noise, but they expect everything handed to them on a silver platter and only act when it's done. I said it's not just like that, and in the end, it all comes down to this. Everyone just... And finances are always intertwined, connected. That's what the war is about. That's what the war is about right now.
It's still hard to find a prospect for peace. The Verkhovna Rada, well, there's little hope for it. There will be. Soon we'll have a broadcast with Marina Stanichuk. We'll ask her how the deputies will act, but she already says that she thinks they won't act at all. They have methods, but they don't use them. People are also powerless.
Will you ask Stanichuk about impeachment? Since she's a specialist, I'm personally interested in her view.
All right, definitely. Thank you for joining us. Please, everyone, subscribe to our channels, like us, share our video. Until next time.
Thank you.